we go. Right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's session of the Bible study Hickory on this 25th day of September 2022. This is going to be our basic Hebrew lesson for the day. And of course, the last time we met 2 weeks ago, we were going over Hebrew verbs. So we had identified the different components of Hebrew verbs. We had seen that Hebrew verbs will consist of a stem, which basically tells us the type of action that is involved with the verb, the aspect, which refers to the completeness of the action, person, gender, and number, and those last three pertain to the subject of the verb. So the first two, stem and aspect, tell us a little something about the action of the verb, and then the last three, person, gender, and number, tell us about the subject. So as far as stems are concerned, that is the type of actions, we have a total of 7 stems in Hebrew. The cow, which is the basic action, I broke the plate. Nifal, which would be the passive of the cow, the plate was broken by me. Piel, intensive action, I shattered the plate. Pual, the passive of the piel, which would be the plate was shattered by me. Hifil, causative action, I caused the plate to break. Hofal, passive of hifil, the plate was caused to be broken by me. And hifpael, reflexive action, which is in fact the plate broke itself. Aspect, completeness of action, we have the perfect, that is completed action, and imperfect, which is incomplete action. So perfect, completed action, this means that this action is done, it is not still ongoing. This corresponds roughly to the past tense in English. It's a little bit more complex than that, but that gets us into the ballpark. Then we also have the imperfect aspect, incomplete action. This corresponds, so the action is still ongoing. This corresponds roughly to our present and future tense. Again, it's a little bit more complex than that, but that gets us into the ballpark. And then person, person of the subject, we have first person, I, second person, you, and third person, he, she, or it. Gender, whether the noun that is serving as the subject is masculine or feminine. And then number, which tells us whether the subject of the verb is singular or plural. Then we had also taken a look at how it is that we can identify the various stems as well. So coming back here, we saw that there are certain diagnostics that tell us about the stem of the verb. So cal is the basic stem. It is therefore the unmarked stem, so there's nothing added to the root here. With the nifal, on the other hand, that is the passive of the cal, a noon has been added to the triliteral root. Piel, very often you're going to have that a pointing that you can see right here, the heric underneath the pe, and then the tsere underneath the ayin. And then also with the ayin, you're also usually going to have that dagesh forte in the middle root letter. It's not here because of the fact that the ayin is a guttural, and gutturals do not take the dagesh forte. But if we were to come on over here, you can see the piel stem. Notice here on our verb, our triliteral root, the kof, tef, and lameth, in the middle root letter, you can see the dagesh forte. And that is there throughout all of those forms. So that dagesh forte is in fact indicative of the piel, as well as of the pual stem. And with the pual, you're also going to see that you have that kibbutz underneath the first root letter. Then for the Hiphial, you have the hay attached to the triliteral root. Hofal as well is going to have the hay, but it's pointed with a comates hatuf. And then the Hifpael as well, we have that prefixed hif there. Then we also saw as well how it is that we can tell the subject of a verb, because whereas what has been added to the stem of the verb tells us what stem we are dealing with. With the subject, the pointing tells us. So thus, cal perfect third masculine singular, notice the pointing for the triliteral root. That is the vowels that we have there. That would be a, a. Third feminine singular, the pointing, the vowels would be a, a. Second masculine singular, a, a. Second feminine singular, a, at. First common plural, a, ati. Third common plural, a, u. Second masculine plural, the atem. Second feminine plural, the aten. And first common plural, a, anu. And then over here on the cal imperfect, and we had discussed a couple weeks ago that one of the things that really tells us for an imperfect, the subject of the verb, are what we call these imperfect performatives.
Can you make your cursor larger? It's very, very small on the screen.
Okay, let me see what I can do there.
Very easy to overlook it.
All right.
And it looks like a small, almost like an apostrophe thing from here. And that may have been, I just had my screen too small, but my screen's about the size of a normal computer for a person. So.
All right. Okay. How's that?
Still kind of small, actually, but
Really? Because it's about that big on my screen.
wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead. It may be a little bit big for you, but if you need to go down a little bit, go ahead. But it just.
All right. Yeah, because I mean, it's that big on my computer screen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Hmm.
Yeah, and now on the Word document, the cursor is that big.
Yeah. Do you have an arrow on yours, or is it just that little, looks like a capital I?
When I'm in Word, it's the capital I, but if I'm out of Word, then it's the arrow.
Okay. It just looks like a kind of a small capital I, but that's okay. Go ahead.
So
we will live with it.
All right. Very good. Okay. So when we were talking about the imperfects, we had noticed that we have this little bit of a mnemonic device. We have the aleph, which signifies first common singular. The noon, which tells us that it's going to be that the verb is first common plural. The yod, that it is third masculine singular or plural, and then the tau, which is everything else, which would be second masculine singular or plural, second feminine singular or plural, and third masculine singular and plural. And so that correlates very nicely with what we see here as we go through this chart for the cal imperfect. So cal imperfect, third masculine singular, yo. Third feminine singular, to. Second masculine singular, to. Second feminine singular, to. First common singular, ao. Third masculine plural, Yi'u. So notice how it is that we can tell the difference then between the third masculine singular and the third masculine plural. Both of them have the yod on the front, but only the plural has that shurik, that U class vowel. So this is one of those ways that we're really going to be able to tell the difference between the third masculine singular and the third masculine plural. When we come to an imperfect verb, we see that yod, we look to the end. If there's a U class vowel at the end, we know that it's going to be plural rather than singular. Then third feminine plural, te'ona. Second masculine plural, te'u. Second feminine plural, te'ona. And first common plural, ne'o. Now, some of those forms, like te'ona, were the same, but again, all of these are going to occur in a context which makes it plain. And so that then is a review of these verb forms that we were looking at. Now let's come back over to our text here in Genesis that we were looking at here. And so, yes, so we are at text width here. So thus, taking a look at this, we had gone through 2 weeks ago and had identified all of the verbs in the English text: created, was, moved, but we saw that moved in the Hebrew text is actually this word here, merachefeth, which we talked about as being a PL participle. So it's not a verb, it's what we call a verbal adjective. Slight difference there. Let be, was, saw, was, divided, called, and were. And we had worked our way through the verbs there in the first 2 verses here. So bara. So with bara, we had seen that we have a triliteral root, nothing added to that particular root, which told me that it was going to be that basic stem, the cal. We don't have an imperfect performative, so I know that it's perfect. And then the is closest to that a pointing that we saw, thus third masculine singular. And so this is exactly what that is, cal perfect, third masculine singular of the verb bara. And so we would translate it as he created. Then we came down to this particular verb here, hayitha, and notice how similar the pointing sounds to the third feminine singular pointing here. Hayitha, a. And so that is exactly what this is. It is third feminine singular here. And again, the triliteral root. So the a has been added for the third feminine singular. Then we have the triliteral root, hey, yod, hey. The hey has changed to a tau under the influence of the a being added, but otherwise nothing added to the root. So this is the cal perfect third feminine singular of the verb haya, and thus we would translate it as she existed. And now we're going to come on down here to this next verb here, wayomer. Now, one of the things that I notice here as we're looking at this, I have a triliteral root here, the aleph, mem, and resh. So this particular verb is the verb amar, which basically we would translate it as he said. So that is my triliteral root here, amar. Notice what we have on the front of it here, this yod. Let's see, we just named 4 different letters, aleph, yod, tau, and nun, which we identified as being the imperfect performatives. So thus, I know then this is going to be an imperfect performative, and let's see, what were those? Aleph is first common singular, nun, first common plural, yod, third masculine singular and plural. How do I tell the difference? For the plural, there's a U class vowel at the end. We don't have a U class vowel at the end here, so I know that this is going to be singular. And then we have the tau, which is everything else. But so I know this is imperfect, third masculine, singular, nothing else added to the stem. So I know this is cal. So we have a cal imperfect, third masculine, singular of the verb amer. And so under normal circumstances, I would translate this as though it is incomplete action. He is saying. But notice when we come back up here to the English. And God, oops, we missed a verb there. And God said, past tense. The very same tense that we had up here for created and was. So, which means then that we would have expected this particular verb to be in the same aspect as bara and hayatha here. But it's not, it's in the imperfect. What has happened? I'm so glad you asked that question. There's one part of this verb that we have not addressed yet, and that is this right here. That wow on the front. Wow with a pathak followed by another dot, and that particular dot is the Dagesh forte. We know it's a Dagesh forte because it's not occurring in one of the Begad Kafat letters. This right here, that wow with the pathak followed by a Dagesh forte, is one of the Hebrew conjunctions. There are two different Hebrew conjunctions that involve a wow. And so this is what we have then, taking a look at this particular sheet. So we have then what we call the wow conjunctive, and then we also have a wow consecutive, and I'm just going to go ahead and spell both of those out for right now. So wow consecutive and wow conjunctive and wow consecutive. When we are dealing with a wow conjunctive, this is, of course, a conjunction. Remember, conjunctions are basically words that join together to equal grammatical elements. And that is exactly what a wow conjunctive does. It just joins together two equal grammatical elements. And so thus, as I've indicated here, it has a tendency to indicate just simple conjunction. And notice what it looks like. It looks like a wow pointed with a simple vocal schwa. We have, as a matter of fact, already seen this particular conjunction elsewhere in this text. Notice here as I go through this. So, Bereshith bara Elohim, Eith hashemayim wa'eith haaretz. And you can see right here what I have highlighted in yellow. This right here is in fact that wow pointed with a simple vocal schwa. And this is a wow conjunctive, just indicating simple juncture. And look at what it is joining together. Eith hashemayim, this would be the heavens, and haaretz, the earth. So it is joining together these two nouns, which are in fact serving as the object of our verb. So it's joining those two things together. Then, as we come on down into verse 2, you can see once again we have another wow conjunctive right there. Wow pointed with a simple vocal schwa, haaretz. So and you can see very same word that we had up here, just with the and on the front of it. So and the earth. So and the earth existed, Thohu wavohu, basically unformed and unfilled. So this here, it's a simple junction. indicating then that this particular clause is indicating the state of the earth in the time when it was created. I'll explain a little bit more about that in just a moment. And then we have another conjunction here, wavohu. That wa on the front is actually, again, another vowel with a simple vocal schwa. It has changed form a little bit to be pointed with the comates instead of the vocal schwa because of the fact that these two words, the thohu and vohu, are very closely related. And so to indicate that close relationship, there is that change in the pointing. But it's basically just another vowel conjunctive there. And then you can see here another conjunction, vowel pointed with a simple vocal schwa. And this would be and darkness. So again, that and there indicating that it is joining back to these previous clauses. Wuruach Elohim. And thus we have again another one of those conjunctions. And the Spirit of God. Right? So again, all of those are simple conjunctions, just indicating simple junction. But then we come down here to verse 3, and you can see the vowel, but it's pointed differently. This one is not pointed with that simple vocal schwa. It is pointed with a pathak. And the reason for that is this is not a vowel conjunctive. This is a vowel consecutive. It's another conjunction joining together two equal grammatical elements. But instead of indicating just simply that two things are being joined together, it also indicates that there is some type of a sequence that is involved here. So as in this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And for this reason, the vowel consecutive, you will see me translate it as then, whereas the vowel conjunctive, which indicates simple juncture, I'll translate as and. So that is what this vowel consecutive does. It indicates sequence. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Now, as we go through this a little bit further, you will see that sequence may not necessarily always be temporal. That is related to time. It may also be logical as well. But basically, it is this idea of then. And so, vowel with a pathak followed by a dogesh forte. And when this vowel consecutive is on an imperfect verb, look at what it does. It makes imperfect verbs perfect. Well, now that solves that particular mystery. That explains why it is that this particular verb here, wayomer, is in fact translated with the same past tense as the perfect verbs that we had up above. Created, was, said. Because that vowel consecutive on the front here has flipped the aspect. It has made this imperfect verb perfect. It has taken a verb form that would indicate incomplete action, and it has flipped the aspect to make it indicate completed action. So thus, I would not translate this as he is saying, but under the influence of the vowel consecutive, flipping the aspect, I would translate it as then he said. So that is what we have here in this instance. And notice how all of these vowel consecutives that are showing up here. We have the vowel consecutive there on wayomer. Then we have the vowel consecutive on wayihi. Again, here's the While consecutive, here's my imperfect performative, the yod. Oh, what does that yod indicate? Let's see. Aleph indicates first common singular. The noon indicates first common plural. The yod indicates third masculine singular or plural. I look to the end to see if there's a U class vowel. There's not, so I know it's singular. So this here, cal, imperfect, third masculine singular, from, notice the root here, hey yod, and the final hey has dropped off. This is from the verb haya, which we saw up above as well. Here, right there, hayitha. So this would be then, and the while consecutive flips the aspect, making the imperfect verb perfect. So then he existed. Then notice as we come on down here a little bit further, now we have vayar. Again, here's my while consecutive. While with the pathak followed by the dagesh forte. The dagesh forte goes inside of the imperfect performative. Here is the yod of the imperfect performative, which we know is third masculine. No U class vowel, so it must be singular. So this again is going to be that cal, imperfect, third masculine singular as well from the verb ra'ah, which means to see. So while consecutive, flipping the aspect, making it completed action. Then he saw. We'll explain that in a little bit. And then we come on down here and we have Wayavdale. Notice again that while consecutive right on the front of it there. So while with the pathak followed by a dagesh forte. And so that dagesh forte goes inside of the imperfect preformative. And here the yod is the imperfect performative, third masculine. There's no U class vowel at the end, so this is going to be singular. So imperfect, third masculine singular. Oh, I've not put the stem on this one yet. The reason for that being, notice the pointing of the imperfect performative here. Instead of having a hierik underneath it, it has a pathak. And if we come on over here to this particular chart, notice when we come on over to the hifil, that is when we see the imperfect performative pointed with that pathak. So notice the cal and the nifal, the imperfect performative is pointed with a hierik. The piel and puel, the imperfect performative, is pointed with a schwa. The hifil, the imperfect performative, is pointed with a pathak. The hofal, the imperfect performative, may be pointed either with a kibbutz or a kametz hatuf. And then with the hifpa'el is really easy to identify. You have the imperfect performative plus the tau of the hifpa'el. Easy pickings there. So thus, again, we have then an imperfect performative that is pointed with a pathak. So we know that this is going to be hifil. So this is actually a hifil imperfect of the verb badal. Badal is, in essence, the idea of to distinguish. So while consecutive, I would translate it as then, and it flips the aspect, making imperfect verbs perfect. So then he, hifil causative, caused distinction. And then if we come on down here, we have again vayikra, another while consecutive. Vayihi, another while consecutive. Vayihi again, another while consecutive. Now, point being, does grammar make a difference? Yes, most definitely it does. Because notice what we have here. First two verses, we saw all of the conjunctions that are used are in fact the wow conjunctive, indicating simple juncture. We do not have any idea of sequence until we get down here to verse 3, with the first wow consecutive being used there on Wyomer. So, thus, what we have then is, in essence, these first two verses, because of the presence of just those wow conjunctions, these are being viewed as a single unit. In other words, this is telling us, those first two verses are telling us the state of the existence of the earth in the time when this verb right here, he created. So at the time of the creation, when the earth was first created, this was in fact the existence of the earth. So what was the existence of the earth at that time? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So all of this, one unit. So at the time of the creation, when the earth was created, this earth at that moment was without form and void. And then, following the end of verse 2, this is when we get our first idea of sequence. Why is this important? You all have probably heard of something that is called the gap theory, which is basically posits that the earth was created perfect as we have it now, and then there was some sort of great destruction that occurred, and then the Lord had to reform it. And that, as a result, this then puts thousands of years in between verse 1 and verse 2. But the issue is the grammar itself does not allow for any gap in time. Does not allow for that. And this thousands of years, that is typically where evolutionists will have a tendency to put all of the fossils, all of the evolution, etc. But there's a problem. The grammar does not allow for that because we do not have any gap in time, so to speak, until we hit that first wow consecutive there in verse 3. And so as a result, then, the Hebrew grammar makes very clear this is not the case. This without form and void, formlessness and emptiness, was the way in which the Lord created the earth, that basic matter, when he first created. And then we get into everything else that was created. Okay, so we can, sir, is there anything that you would like to add there?
I don't think so. That
Okay.
seems good. for
All
the
right.
team. So,
All right.
you seem to be saying that I should not believe in the gap theory.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. I won't. All right.
Yes. Very good.
What?
All right. We'll go ahead and I'll stop the recording then, and we'll take a little bit of a break, and then I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll see all of you in a minute,
All right.
few minutes.